All right, we're going to talk about the two basic time value of money problems, the future value and present value of a single cash flow, and then briefly followed up by explaining a series of cash flows. But we're not going to get into details that much. We're mostly going to focus on single cash flow, a lump sum. And although we have talked about future value in the previous videos, when we were talking about compound interest, but here we will try to make more sense of it. But still, if you haven't watched those videos, please go back and see them. I'll put the playlist link in the description below. And explaining present value, since present value and future value are very much linked, it's kind of difficult to talk about one without the other. And unlike future value concepts, the present value may not be very intuitive at first. So I'm going to use future value concept mostly to explain present value, which is one of the most useful concepts in finance. Actually, both of them. And, just so you know how practical and useful they are, let's take a look at the types of questions we can ask and hopefully answer in the next few slides. Now, the common future value questions would be, how much will you have in the future if you invest a certain amount of money today, which hopefully you all know how to do by now. We have done a few examples of this kind. So you have $10,000 and at a 10% quarterly compounding rate, how much will you have in, let's say, 10 years, right? And another common future value question would be how much a certain item will cost in the future. And we normally use inflation rate to do that. So you want to buy something that costs $5,000 today, but you can't pay for it now. So you want to buy it, I don't know, in 7 years. So that item costs a certain amount of money today, but it's not going to cost the same in 7 years. So how much will that cost in 7 years? We use inflation rate to do that. And the common present value questions would be how much do you need to invest now, today, to get a certain amount in the future? So let's say you have to pay up a certain amount in 10 years. Let's say you got to pay up $50,000. So you want to know how much should you invest today that if it grows with a certain interest rate will become $50,000 in 10 years in the future, whatever that time is. And another one, how much would you pay for an investment today that is going to pay a certain amount in the future? So this is very common when you want to buy a business, let's say. So let's say you're estimating that business is going to generate certain cash flow. Let's say that business will pay up $5,000 after 3 years, then another $10,000 after 7 years from now. So if you want to buy that business, what is the fair value for that business? That the cash flows of that business is going to be in the future, but you want to pay for that business today. So how can you decide what is the fair value of that business so you can compare it to other businesses, and if you know the fair value, then you can find out if you can find a good bargain or not. And the last one, which is a combination of present value and future value question, is that a certain amount of money today or a certain amount of money in 5 years, let's say. Which one is better? So how can you decide? Let's say you're offered $500,000 today or $800,000 in 5 years, right? Which one should you choose? Which one is better? Well, $800,000 is obviously more than $500,000, but that will happen 5 years from now or sometimes from now. And the other amount is today. So how can you decide which one is actually better? So these are the type of questions that we're going to go through in the next few slides. I'm going to answer all of them and explain all of them. And so many other more complex concepts from different valuation models, stock valuations, net present value, which is very useful when you want to compare different investments, to, I don't know, bond yields are all going to be built from these ideas. So understanding the logic of it is very important. And in the next few slides, we're going to learn how to answer these questions. But first, in order to understand the relationship between present value and future value and how they are linked, we're going to review the principle behind time value of money and then discuss the link. So bear with me. It will save you from a lot of headaches later on. Okay, so I'm sure you've heard the expression time is money. Well, time is literally money. Now, to understand that, let's review two of the principles behind time value of money. Number one, money has time value because individuals value a given amount of money more highly the earlier it is received, right? Number two, time value of money concerns equivalence. Pay attention to this word. Relationships between cash flows occurring on different dates. Now, when it comes to individuals value a given amount of money more highly the earlier it is received, it's kind of clear. So it says that, let's say this is 0, meaning today. This is 2 years from now. So $100 today and $100 in 2 years. If you're given the option, which one would you choose? Well, obviously $100 today, right? Because you know that $100 today is not equal to $100 2 years from now, right? For many reasons. One, inflation. So if you can buy certain items with that $100 today, you can buy less of the same things with $100 2 years from now because of the inflation rate, right? And the other one would be that, well, if you have $100 today, you can invest it and earn some return. So we know for a fact that $100 today and $100 2 years from now are not equal. Not only that, we know for a fact that $100 today is definitely worth more than $100 2 years from now, for the reasons we just mentioned. And also, you know, money today gives you choice. You can spend it or invest it. Now, we know that $100 is not equal to $100 2 years from now. It's worth more. Now, the question is, $100 today, what amount is equal to our $100 today in 2 years? I'll explain what I mean by equal soon. But for now, let's say you have access to a 10% return. So you can invest your money at a 10% rate. Then the future value of your money in 2 years, where we know how to calculate, well, obviously depends on the rate, the interest rate that you're getting on your money, the frequency of compounding, how many times per year your money is being compounded, and for how long are we talking about? In this case, we're talking about 2 years, right? So let's say I'm getting 10% return on my money, right? And let's say that return is annual return. So the frequency of compounding is 1. And we're talking about 2 years from now, so number of periods would be 2. And to calculate the future value of that, well, pretty simple. We all know that's the formula. So future value equals, we're talking about $100 multiplied by 1, 10% rate, 0.1 to the power of number of periods, which is 2. But always remember, the reason I did not put it in the original formula is that so you can always remember. If we are talking about frequency of compounding other than annual, so we're talking about, let's say, 10% at a semi-annual compounding rate, then you have to adjust your rate and the number of periods by m, frequency of compounding. So if your frequency of compounding is semi-annually, right, so you have to divide r by 2 and then multiply your number of periods by 2 as well. So remember that. We call that m. So remember, you always have to adjust it. But in this case, we're talking about annual rate, so no need to adjust it. Now, getting back to this formula, Let me put it here also as well so you know what we're talking about, but it's 1. We can just ignore it. So it will become $121, right? Meaning that if you invest your $100 at a 10% rate, after 2 years, it becomes $121, right? That's the future value. Now, why am I saying that's equal to $100 today? Well, let's look at it this way. Let's say somebody comes up to you and say, all right, give me your $100, and in exchange for your $100, I will give you, I don't know, let's say $110 in 2 years. What would you say? You're going to say no, right? Because I can invest my $100 at a 10% rate and get $121. Why should I give my money to you so you will give me less than what I can get myself, right? So in other words, for you, assuming that you have access to a 10% rate, your money is worth $121 in 2 years. So you're not going to accept anything less than that. So the future value of your $100 is $121. That's how much your $100 is worth in 2 years. Now, if somebody comes up to you and say, all right, in exchange for your $100, I will give you $121, then you'll be indifferent because you're going to say, all right, if I have my $100, I can invest my $100 at a 10% rate and get $121 in 2 years. Otherwise, you're giving me the same amount anyway, assuming you have the same amount of risk, I'll accept because I'm indifferent, because $100 is equal to $121 in 2 years, given a 10% annual rate. Now, since we agreed that these two numbers, given this rate, are equal, can I also say that, $121 is equal to $100 today? In other words, the equivalent amount of $121 in 2 years in terms of today's dollar, let's call this today's dollars, right? So $121 is $100 in terms of today's dollar, right? So that's the present value. So $100 is the present value of $121. Now, to understand this even better, let's say in terms of offering you different numbers, let's say somebody walks up to you and says that, all right, you did not accept my $110. Let's say I'll take your $100, and in exchange for that, I will give you, I don't know, let's say $130 in 2 years. Well, assuming they carry the same risk, you're going to say, oh, that's great. I'll take it. Take my money. Because if I have my $100, I can invest it at a 10% rate and get $121. You're giving me more than that. So that's a good deal, right? But now the question is, how much is this $130 in terms of today's dollar? How much this $130 that is happening in 2 years is worth today? And to find that out, all we need is this formula right here. We don't need anything else. So in this case, when we are asking what is the today's dollar amount of this $130 in 2 years, given the 10% rate, is that, so in this case, in this formula, we have the future value, which is $130. We know what the rate is. We know the compounding frequencies, which is 1. We know n, 2 years, right? So we have everything except PV, right? Present value. So with a little bit of algebra, we can, isolate PV, right? If we divide both sides of the equation with this term, right, we are left with PV equals future value divided by 1 plus r to the power of n. Again, let's put our m also here and here. So that's the formula for present value. That's the formula for future value, right? When we are calculating future value, meaning we are going forward, we are multiplying when we are talking about present value, we're going backwards. We are dividing, right? So now, going back to the question, so $130, how much is it worth in today's dollar? All right, present value equals 130 divided by 1 plus, again, decimal way, 10% to the power of 2. 1, just so you can remember that. So, how much will this be? It will be $107.44. So that means $130 in 2 years in today's dollar is worth 107.44. So that's the equivalence amount to that $100. Now the question was that, all right, give me your $100 and I'll give you $130. We understood that if I have my $100 with me, I can invest it at 10%, get 121. The guy is giving more, so I'll accept. But another way to look at it is that, okay, I have $100 in today's dollar, right? So I have $100, but this amount that is happening in the future, in terms of today, it's worth $107.44, right? So I'm paying $100 for something that is worth $107. So I'm paying $7.44 less than what I should pay. That's why I think that's a good deal, right? $107.44 is the fair value of $130. That's the fair value. I'm paying less than the fair value, so that's why that's a good deal, right? And another way that we can look at it is that to understand the equivalence rate is that the equivalence value is that, all right, so $130 is worth $107.44 in today's dollar. Another way to look at it is that if I want $130 in 2 years with a 10% rate, I have to put up $107.44 so that when this amount grows in 2 years with this rate becomes $130, right? So let's also understand some terminology here. If we have our PV here and our future value here, so generally when we're going forward, that's called the interest rate, which in our example is 10%. Now, when we are going backwards from future value to present value, it is called discount rate, which is the same rate, just different terminology for different situations. So when we're going backwards, it is called discounting, discount rate. When we're going forward, that is interest rates. Okay, great. I'll let that sink in. In the next slide, we're going to do a few examples so we can fully understand the concepts.